Correct.
Cool. Okay. So it's Friday. We appreciate all of you being here. We know there's a couple other big events going on, but we're gonna zoom right on.
So to speak.
So to speak.
Good one, T.
Thanks.
All right. So I'll go ahead and continue to share my video until I log into the Vita system. But once I get into the Vita system, I'm going to stop my video of myself because I have a really bad internet connection. So again, we're here to talk about elements today. And specifically, everything that you put into the element side. So these are going to be things like your scholarly and creative works, any service you've done, awards, and that type of thing. Periodically, we like to, oh, funny, Jared. I'm sorry, I just got distracted by the chat box. So again, here's those same helpful links that we shared yesterday on our video yesterday. Our LOD website, we have a specific page that has Vita help on it. So that's the Go link, go.osu.edu/OSUE, Vita help. And then if you need some help writing goals, we have that link up there. Or if you want to download the demographic data form for your participants registration, that link is up there on the screen too. Again, we're talking about Vita today. Specifically, we're going to get into this egg yolk here. This is where you're going to be able to do searches of databases for publications you might have out there on the web on other databases. We're going to talk about funding, any money that you might get, publications, service, awards, and your personal profile. We will spend a couple minutes back in the Vita wrapper again today to talk briefly, very briefly, about narratives and how you might generate a dossier report. But again, that's stuff that mainly faculty members who are going for promotion need to worry about, and not the general population or most of our extension educators and program assistants. So what other things are going into elements? You will have an elements profile in the system. This is where your academic appointment will be, any non-academic appointments. As educators and program assistants, even though you're not faculty members, we still consider those academic appointments. If you would like to put in any of the educational degrees you've received, you can put that in this profile section of elements. If you speak some other languages, you can put that in this section. Please make sure if you do speak another language and you type it in there, that you actually do speak that language. Because if you type in Pig Latin and then you try to go to delete it, it's not going to come out of there. So make sure you actually speak the language that you say that you're speaking. Addresses, this is where you can update your like if you have a website, URL or blog or something like that, you can add those into this part. Just as a reference, it's not for, hey, I manage this particular website and this is part of my body of work. This is also where you can link to all your items and activities from this profile page. You can also do that. In Elements, we have account settings. If your supervisor has asked you to add them as a delegate in your Vita profile, you're going to do that you're going to do that in two places. In Elements, it's going to be under the account settings. You will also add delegates in Vita, and that would be under account settings as well in Vita. You can also manage publication search settings and the way your author name appears in publications. For example, I might have out there in the universe, I might have a Deborah K. Lewis, I might have a Lewis, DK. So there's several different variations of my name that may have been used for different publications. So this is where you're going to manage that information too, is under publications and search settings. So then we have some teaching activities. We talked a lot yesterday about the extension programs section in the extension module. If you have any teaching that you do where you don't have a large P program set up in your extension profile, then you're going to add that to this section in Elements. It's going to be considered an extension and continuing education instruction. Also, if you teach a course, a university level course, it might be Ohio State, it might be a different university, but if there is a course number associated with that class, this is where you're going to put that type of instruction. So if you're teaching a college level course. So for extension and continuing education instruction, this is also where if you have been invited into a college level course as a guest instructor or guest lecturer, this is where you're going to put that type of instruction as well. So I used to do a couple of different sessions for the methodology class in ACEL or course in ACEL. So I would put those topics that I taught into this extension and continuing education instruction section. And I would select guest lecture for the type of course. This is also where you're going to add any individual instruction. So during the course of the year, you might have several different times when someone comes into your office and you have a one-on-one visit with someone where you're instructing them. Now, keep in mind that instructing is different than informing. So it needs to be like an instructional session, not just informative, like, oh, this is when the next meeting is going to occur. You need to actually be teaching them something. So that's considered individual instruction. And individual instruction might occur with a phone call. It might be an email exchange between you and another person. It might also be, like I just said, an office visit. So during the course of the year, you try to keep track of all of those different instances of individual instruction. And then in this element side, under extension and continuing education instruction, you're going to add an entry for each of the themes that you have in your profile. For example, as a 4-H educator, I would often do education around volunteer management. If I, had individual instruction cases where I was doing volunteer development, then I would put that as one entry for the course of the year. I would count up all of my emails, individual emails, my phone calls, and my office visits that had to do with volunteer development, and put that as one item for that calendar year. And then I would do that. There's usually about 3 different themes that you can kind of organize all of those individual instruction instances around. T, did you have something you wanted to add to that? I saw you turned your video back on.
No, ma'am, I just turned my video back on.
Okay, cool. Makes me feel less alone.
Yeah, no.
One other thing that you can add into, or you should be adding into the extension and continuing education instruction section would be if you are invited somewhere to give you a specific example. I had somebody email me this week and said, I'm going to do a Zoom presentation for our local Kiwanis, and they want to know some information about what's going on in extension in my county. So they don't necessarily have anything in their extension profile like a large P program pertaining to this presentation, but it is an instructional event. So they would put that instance under this part, elements, extension, and continuing education instruction. And it would just be as an individual instance of instruction. And they would select extension and continuing education as the type of course. The other thing is for individual instruction, I skipped over this part. When you're counting up your email, office visits, and et cetera for a given year for a given topic, the enrollment that you're going to add for that entry and the course number of times the course meets, those 2 numbers are going to be equal. So say you had like 120 phone calls, office visits, emails, on a particular topic. So that would be 120 for your enrollment and 120 for the number of times the course meets. Those two numbers should match up. All right, on this slide, I put a little kind of helper because in all of our previous systems, we used to have two different sections. One was called Published Works, one was called Creative Works. And when you print out a dossier document or your extension in a report, they're still separated into those two types of items, but they're not on the screen in Elements. In the screen on Elements, they're all grouped under publications. So I pulled out the types of things that we typically might see from extension employees. So if you have an abstract or a short entry, there's an actual section called Abstracts and Short Entries in Elements, and that would be considered a published works. If you wrote a book, that would go under this section called Publications. This does not include like a 4-H project book. If you're an author on a 4-H project book, that's actually considered a bulletin, technical report, or fact sheet. Another item that could go under a bulletin, technical report, or fact sheet that is not actually inherent in the title would be something like an infographic. If that infographic is published somewhere, then you can include that under bulletin, technical report, or fact sheet. If you were the author of a chapter in an edited book, then this would go here. For conference, so this can get a little bit confusing for people sometimes. If you did a poster presentation at a national conference, for example, that would go under conference. But if you did a presentation at a national conference, that would go under presentation. You see here at the bottom where it says presentation scholarly works. The reason is the conference, these are actual publications or physical items. So also goes under conference are conference papers and proceedings. So if you had a white paper that was published in the conference proceedings, that would go under conference. And also if you had a poster, that also goes under conference. So typically in our old systems and our previous systems, if we did a presentation or a poster at a conference, a national conference, it would go under presentation. But in this new system, it goes under conference. Now, the next item you will see is very enticing to people. General press articles. Automatically, people want to put their newspaper stuff in there and radio stuff, anything that's like lay publication. That doesn't go in there. Stay out of general press article. The only thing that should go under general press is if you read a book, you wrote a book review, and that book review was published somewhere. That is the only thing that should go into a general press article. And I don't know about you, but I haven't written a book report since I was in high school. There might be some of you out there that are doing that, but likely probably not. So if you do have a newspaper article or a newsletter or something like that that you are really tempted to put under general press article, put it under other creative work. So that's where all of your newspaper articles, things like that are going to go. Journal articles, that's pretty self-explanatory. Media. So this is where all of your audiovisual work types of things are going to go. So radio broadcast, television broadcast, an online broadcast, like a YouTube video or a podcast. Those would go under media. Multimedia databases and websites. These are things like your Facebook pages, your county website. If you're, managing and updating that, that would go under there. Other creative works, I already said a couple things, so newspaper articles. And as you're adding things to other creative works, for example, if you are writing a monthly column for a newspaper, don't put in, or a weekly column, don't put in 52 entries. Just put in one entry, say it was a weekly newspaper column for XYZ newspaper, and then under the description of effort, you can list the types of topics that you kind of covered during the course of that year. So it's one entry, it says 52 times written, or however many times it was published, and that better description goes into your description of effort field. Let's see, other creative works also, you could do like newsletters to your volunteers. This is another thing that's in other creative works. Potential publications under review. If you've submitted something and it hasn't actually been published yet, there's a place for you to put that. And then presentations. As I said before, this would be something for a national, like a professional organization that you're presenting at a national meeting. Typically, what we were putting into the element side is any presentations that you're doing to or for your peers to add to a body of knowledge. So it's not typically a presentation for example, for your volunteers or community members. So it's kind of like dependent on the audience here. Up here at the top of the slide, you'll see a little note that says, be sure to add any information about, you need to add supporting data for anything that you're adding under publication. So for example, if I'm the co-author of a journal article, I need to go under supporting data in Vita, and I need to indicate whether or not that journal article was peer reviewed. And I also need to indicate my % of authorship. And then there's another field under supporting data that asks what my particular effort was on this article or the publication journal. So that would go under supporting data. So you need to fill supporting data out for each of your publications, and I'll be showing you that. So virtual Ohio 4-H conference session, which category? If you did a presentation there, you could, because it was an organized conference, you could put that under a presentation. Okay. All right. So professional activities, these are more things that you're going to put into the elements side of the Vita system. So if you are an advisor for a student group, that goes here. Any committee memberships, and these would be things at the unit, college, or university level committee. So these would be things like if you serve on a search committee for a position, for example, you could put that under committee membership. If you are serving on one of the committees that Jackie has been setting up recently, for example, the diversity one and the balancing work and family, I'm not sure of the official names of those would be considered unit committees because they are in the extension department. So that would go under committee membership. Whereas if you're a member of JSEP, or other professional organizations, that goes under membership, which is also in this professional activities section. And under membership, you will be able to list whether or not you are an officer, et cetera. So leadership roles you can list under that membership. I'll get to your question in just a second, Gwen. If you have awards, this is going to go under professional activities. And since this module was created by the British, we use our proper British English and we call it a distinction instead of an award. But if you're looking to where to put your awards, this is where you put that. And you're going to associate those awards whether or not they're teaching, research, or service type awards. You're going to have to select one of those items. And then it will populate to the correct part of your document. Editorial would be things like if you served as a peer reviewer for a conference to request for proposals, that could be in this editorial section. Also, if you are a manuscript reviewer, that's considered service, and that could go under this editorial section. If you have a license, a professional license, this would go under professional activities. I'm going to come back up here. Extension Annual Conference Planning Committee. Yeah, you could put that under a unit committee because it is for our Department of Extension. Okay, Susan. Okay, so
do you need more clarification on that question?
Susan, I think that would go under service. So I think under other professional public service, there is actually a preceptor choice in the drop down. But remind me when we get to that section and we'll check it out, okay?
Thank you.
I'm pretty sure that would go under other professional public service. If you were a mentor, that would also go under other professional public service. And then strategic initiatives, the diversity statement. Typically, we're concerned about this when we're going for promotion. So if you're not going for promotion, I wouldn't worry about that diversity statement in there. But if you want to put that in there, that's where it goes under professional activities and strategic initiatives. All right, so grants. It's called grants in this system, but it's any type of funding that you might get. So don't think it has to be a grant. It might be a contract. It might be some money that you get for collecting fees for a workshop, for example. You can put cartoons money in here as an example if you charge for that type of thing. If it's a research contract or grant, that goes in here. Training contractor grant, subcontract, clinical trial, a gift, scholarly award, for example, a JSUP scholarship. And any like monies for professional development. Those all go under grants. And then narratives. So again, the only people that really need to be concerned about the narratives, which we'll see those back on the gray navigation bar in Vita, are people that are faculty members who are in the promotion and or tenure process. All right, so I've put a list on the screen here. So if you're viewing this video later, you can do a pause and see all of the types of narratives we have. They've been separated out into different categories. And the ones that have the triple asterisk next to them, those are the ones that are required by OAA or by the Department of Extension. And again, those are only necessary for faculty members going for promotion. The other thing that lives in Vita, but it's gonna be pulling items from both the extension module and from the element side of the system are your documents. So if you're going for promotion, under documents, you will see under this tab called documents, you will see an option to print a dossier report. And that might be the case if you're in a department faculty member with an extension appointment like Lynn Knipe here, then your department chair might be asking for this dossier report as an annual performance review kind of documentation. Each department is different. And then if you would like to supplement that information as a faculty member in a department, you could also print out an extension annual report and include the extension program section if you have used that part of the system. But as an extension employee, each year you're going to generate one of these under department extension annual report. And we talked about that briefly yesterday. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and get into the system now. All right, hopefully everybody can see my screen okay. Let me see if I can remove my Zoom toolbar so it's not blocking the way. Okay, so here we go. I'm gonna go back to the Vita home bar. So you can see that I have logged in. I'm actually impersonating someone right now. So I'm gonna stop doing that. But I probably need to log in again because it's been a while. And that's a very important thing to remember, actually. If you have been working in Vita and then you let it rest, or like you get distracted by something else, which never happens in extension world, right? But if you leave it for too long, you could get logged out of the system and not actually realize it, because it will still look like you're logged in. So if you have been away from the system, it's a good idea to like log out, sign out, and then log back in like I just did, to make sure that you are like logged into the system as you're adding data, because I'd hate for you to be putting stuff into the system, then you click on the submit button or the save button, and it doesn't actually save it for you. So it's a good idea to try to remember to do that. So there's a couple different ways you can get to this different section in Elements. I told you yesterday the only time you need to click on this Curate Elements Data button is the very first time you log in. It will also take you to the landing page for Elements if you want to use that button. But I typically use this navigation bar up here because it's a little bit quicker. So I can get to my Elements dashboard here from here, or I can go directly to professional activities, teaching activities, publications, or grants. So I'm going to start off just on that home page. So when you click on that, it opens a new window, and this is kind of like the landing page. This will tell me how many of each of these items in each category that I have in the system. And if I want to click on one of these, I can go directly to that entry. You can also see up in here in the upper left-hand corner that I am logged in as Debby Lewis. I'm going to start with probably the profile. I want to make sure I show you where you can add, for example, your supervisor as a delegate to your account. So under here, where it says View Profile, actually, I just missed it. You can also get to different parts of the system, okay? So it has this About tab that shows me all of the stuff that I have in my, basically my profile. It talks about my education that I've entered into the system. It gives my address. It gives a list of recent publications. And you can also like tab to the different sections by clicking up here on these different section headers. I'm going to click back on the menu again, and then Account Settings, Manage Delegates. This is where you can add someone else to your account to add them as a delegate. So I probably can't do this 2 days in a row. Oh my gosh, look at that. So I can add, for example, Amy as a delegate to the system, to my profile. And this means that Amy can go into the system and log in as me and impersonate me. So just remember that when you're adding someone as a delegate, that's what it means. They can go into the system and impersonate you. This is really helpful, though, for your supervisor to have that type of access so they can help you out if you're struggling with where to put something or something's not displaying correctly. They can sometimes go in and troubleshoot and help you troubleshoot. But if your supervisor can't help you with that, then that's what I'm here for. And we also have the email address that I shared yesterday, vita@osu.edu. So if you're having any technical difficulties, make sure you're using that email address. If you have questions about where to put something, then that's something that you can ask of me. Because if you ask them, they're the people over at the Office of Distance Education and E-Learning are the folks that get those emails to vita@osu.edu. They might not know where to put a particular item, but they are really good at helping you with technical issues, which I can't do anything about, unfortunately. So I'm going to go ahead and start off under Publications. And you'll see how I have a list of publications here. Since I use my account as a training account, you'll see a lot of tests in here. So that's typically what I advise people to do. If you have something that you're adding into the system, the first thing I usually like to do is open up or add a new something or other. And then as I'm adding it, I kind of put all of the field labels as the labels in the, I just type in the field label as the actual input. I'll give you an example here. So up here, let's say I want to add a new fact sheet. So I click on this little drop down next to add a new publication. And then I'm going to find the Bulletin Technical Report fact sheet. So this is where I'm going to visit. So as you're adding new things into Elements, there's this very helpful search page that you see first. I typically skip this search page. The reason being is it's going and searching databases like the World of Science. There's several different databases that's searching. Typically, they're ones that extension folks do not publish to. And if you have a really common name, it's going to bring in thousands and thousands of helpful articles, 0 of which are probably yours. So that's why I usually skip this step. But if you have a more unusual name, you could probably go ahead and do that step and search for items. But I'm going to click skip. Of course, it probably caught me picking search first. Okay, so you'll have some information here at the top that tells you where it's going to go into the system. If you are, this is a fact sheet. So if you were both the author of and contributor to, or maybe the editor of as well, only pick one of these items. If you pick multiple of these items, if I pick 3 of these items, for example, this is going to appear 3 times on my document. So if you were the author of this or co-author of this, just click on author, because that's kind of like the highest level. Don't click on editor of, don't click on contributor. You can describe all of that in the description of effort field under the supporting data. So here is where I was telling you, I kind of just enter in whatever this field label is. I enter it into the actual field. And that's so that I can, when I print out my document, I can see where it's going and I can see that it's printing correctly. If you have like a list of 10 fact sheets that you publish during a year or over the course of a couple years and you're going for promotion, and you need to enter all those, don't enter all 10 of them and then go look at your document. Enter one, go look at your document, make sure it's printing out the way you expect it to be printing out, or that it's even there at all, because sometimes data black holes occur. It just happens. So make sure that you do one at a time, or after you've done that first one, go ahead and add the other ones as long as you've checked it and made sure that it is printing out correctly on your document. And by printing out, I just mean go generate the document and see if it's there in the section you expect it to show up in. So publication type, I said this is going to be a fact sheet. So title of fact sheet, I'm going to select fact sheet from this dropdown. You can see the different types of things you can put in here. For example, an infographic, I would probably do select an option. If you ever have something, an entry that you want to put into the system and you look at this dropdown and nothing really fits, you can change it back to select an item and then just come down to this little box below it. It's a text entry box, but it doesn't actually tell you that it's a text entry box, that you can describe what it is. And I can't spell today, so excuse me. But anyway, so you can say what it is. So this infographic would still go in this bulletin technical report or fact sheet because it's kind of like a technical report in graphic form. It's giving you information, usually stats and some impact information. So I consider that a technical report. But since we said this wasn't a fact sheet, I'm going to go ahead and change this back. I just wanted to show you that if there was something that was missing from that dropdown, then you can go ahead and type it in. All right, so publication status, is it published, is it forthcoming, or is it in press? So I'm going to say this one's published, and I'm going to select the publication date. And let's just say this was January this year. You have to select an actual day. The publisher, you need to add a publisher name. You would type in the actual name. I believe you have to type in at least the name and the city. For it to print out. So once you've typed in that publisher name, go ahead and click on add. And then it will pop up in this publisher box. Report number, if you have a report number for this, or any of these other types of numbers. If you have a URL, for example, if the fact sheet lives online somewhere, you can put the URL address in there. If you look over to the right-hand side, anywhere in Elements where you see a blue question mark over on the right, it's going to tell you where it displays in the dossier document. And what's helpful is this is also where it's going to appear in your extension annual report, because we've pulled all of the information into the extension annual report template outline that you input into the system into Elements. It all gets populated onto your extension annual report in the appropriate section. But just as a heads up, these are the ones that, these are the fields that actually appear on your document. And then over here on the left, you'll see the ones that are required fields, are these red asterisks. So I went ahead and clicked on saved. And this is not going to, it's going to give you this intermediary step where if you've entered a grant that maybe was supported, or maybe this is a publication, like a product of a grant, you can associate a grant with it. But I'm going to say this is not externally funded. And then I can go and look at it if I want to. So here it is in the raw, okay? If I want to go back to my list of publications, I just click here. So that's how you add a publication. And earlier we talked about, you know, which type of publication goes where. So the what goes where, we've already covered. If you have input something into, for example, you added it as a conference and you really wanted to add that as a presentation. If you click on this little edit pencil right next to the bottom where it's telling you which category it's in, if you click on this edit pencil, I can change this from, for example, a bulletin technical report or fact sheet, and I can change it to media. Be aware that if you change where something lives, okay, if you change where it lives, those fields that we were entering data into are going to change. So if you change the category that it's in, make sure you go back into the entry, open it up, and I just clicked on that. We'll see if it actually opens for me. There we go. Click on Edit Record, and then you'll see that the fields have changed. So I might need to update some information in here based on the fact that I changed it from one category to another. You see what is missing though? That very first box that said, how are you associated with this item? So once you have selected that one time, you cannot change it. So that was where it said author of, editor of, contributor to, etc. So make sure you have selected the right thing at the beginning. But this is a way for you to change that if you need to. And it's a quick way. But just make sure if you do change something to go in and recheck all of the fields, because the fields have changed because they are dependent on the type of publication that you're adding into the system. And now it's going to start slowing down on me. Okay, so heads up, this is one of the only places where this little shortcut edit menu actually works. I'll show you in a second another section where you'll see a shortcut to a date to try to edit a date of a grant, for example, and those fields are not sticking correctly. I'm going to probably get into grants last. I'm going to go into professional activities next. So again, this is where you're putting in your service, awards, this type of thing. So professional activities would include, for example, here's a title of a manuscript reviewer. So this was under the editorial section. So this is, again, someplace where you can change a category if you need to, and those are working fine. But if I try to click on this little edit next to this date, the date fields are not holding. So use the edit pencil next to a category, but don't try to use these. If you need to change the date of something, go ahead and open up the the title of it, and then click on this Edit Record button. So depending on the type of service that you select, or professional activity, I should say, that you select, will depend on which section it goes into. When we went over those different types, we have the committee membership, and remember those are the committees, for example, for the unit, the college, or the university level, whereas membership would be things like Ohio JSEP, NAE, I can't say 4HA because they changed their name. So any of those professional organizations that you belong to, those go under memberships. And you just fill out all of the fields that appear. So I'll just click on that one, for example. So what's the name of the society or organization? This might be, you know, we're the Alpha Eta, so I can't remember the initials, chapter of ESP. You could put that up here, and then ESP would be the name of the organization. And you can see organization is spelled with an S, right? We don't spell organization that way, do we? The title of the organization, so that could be JSEP here or ESP. Your role. So you could say if you were a member or if you were treasurer. So you could add any of your if you're an officer on in a member an organization, you would add that in here. Start date, end date. Typically, we keep these within a reporting year, but since this is a membership to a professional organization, you can have this go over multiple years. Just either don't put an end date here, and it will always say on your documents whatever the start date was when you first joined an organization, and it will say to present. Go ahead and cancel that one. So we did talk about the other types of professional activities that would go in here. Remember, distinction is an award. When I told you you select teaching, research, or service, this is where you would select that type of thing. So if you got a team teaching award from ESP, that would go under teaching. If you got some type of other award like tools of the trade, I can't remember all the different categories, those might be considered creative works, or you can select extension as the type of award too. So again, fill out all the fields that are mandatory and or display on your document. Okay, that's about all the time I'm going to spend in professional activities. I'm going to switch over to teaching activities. Remember, I told you that this is where you would add any guest lectures, individual instruction, or one-offs, I like to call them. It's a program that you're delivering to people. It's not at a national for one of your professional organizations. You're not presenting to people inside our organization. It's maybe you're presenting to a local community organization. That would be considered a one-off, where you don't have a large extension program in your extension profile. So, for example, if I look at this guest lecture here, you can see the course title, put the course title in here, and then the type of course. Be aware that any of these items that you select, there's precepting, any of these items that you select will generate a separate table in your documents. So if you select extension for something, you're going to have an extension that's going to go into your extension teaching table. If you select guest lecture, you're going to see a separate table in your teaching section that says guest lecture. So any of these are going to generate a separate table for you in your document. I'm going to put in the name of the institution, and that would be where you are teaching from. When it was offered, so spring, this is a guest lecture. If you're putting in individual instruction, you would just click on this little radio button and type in the word calendar year. because the period offered, the only thing we get are school semesters. So just for anything that's individual instruction or extension or something that you do year round, then just do this radio button and type in calendar year. For the start date and end date, for example, for your individual instruction instances, you would put January 1st of that year to December 31st of that year. So remember I said to report individual instruction within a given year per calendar year. So you're going to put most of your teaching activities that you might do under this teaching activity section and extension and continuing education instruction, unless you are the course, the instructor of record of a different like college level course. All right, I'm going to go switch back to, because I think, Susan, I just answered that preceptor question, right? Under this teaching activities. So that would be under extension and continuing education instruction, and then you could select precepting. Okay. All right, grants is the last section. So remember I told you these little date things don't work. So if I need to change the dates here, I'm going to actually open up my record and then click on edit record. And then I will edit this, and if I need to change the dates, for example, I will change them down here. The dates can be tricky for grants. You just need to be aware that, again, if you have multiple instances of different grants that, or gifts or money that you want to add into the system, add one at a time. Make sure that they're appearing on your document. If they're not, try changing the dates. With like change one of the dates to within the calendar year to see if it will make the item print. And again, you're going to fill out all of the applicable fields. You'll see over here on the left which ones are required fields, and you'll see on the right which ones appear in your document. Okay, so I just clicked on the home. If I wanted to get back to Vita, the way I could do it is clicking on this Vita tab here. And I just wanted to spend just a minute or two in that supporting data section to show you. So supporting data, you'll see several different options under here. This professional development option is probably going to be very enticing for people to go in there and try to fill that out. That's not where your professional development activities go. Like, for example, attending this session today. That's not going to go there. This was made specifically for faculty members going for promotion who need to report any professional development activities they participated in to improve their teaching specifically. So you're not going to be putting things into this professional development section. Where you will be adding supporting data is to your publications. So for example, if you are a co-author on something, you would need to go in here and fill out additional information. So when you first get to this page, it's going to be blank, but you can use these filters over here on the right-hand side. For example, if you know the specific title of whatever it is that you're looking for, you can type it in here. If you know it's a bulletin technical report or fact sheet, you can just click on there. And it will bring up everything that you've put into the system, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and click on this first one up here. And you'll see the things pop up that say, okay, here's what you need to add. So I need to put, I'm going to click on the edit button here. And you'll see here that I have put some information in this one previously. If you are not the sole author, then you need to add whether you're a co-author, if you're the first author listed, last author. If you are a co-author, you will need to come on over here and change the % contribution to whatever your contribution was, and then list in here a description of what your description of effort. So don't just say you wrote 50% of the article or whatever that might be. Put the actual, everything that you did. You researched, you edited, you did whatever it was that you did to get this publication produced. And then click on Save Changes. So that's really important, especially when you're a co-author on things. But this is where you're going to be putting that description of effort. For example, this one, if you, for example, were the author of a weekly newspaper column, then this is where you could put that, I was talking about earlier, your description of effort would be, a weekly newspaper column on the title of the column, and then you could say what the topics were that you covered throughout the year. And then back here also, this is where you're going to be able to generate your dossier document. You can preview your dossier if you want to, or you can get back to that annual report if you need to as well. One other thing I wanted to show you real quick, when you're in your publications or any other section here in Vita and you have a lot of items that are showing up on your screen and you're looking for one thing in particular, maybe it's not showing up in your document and you need to find it. You can use this filter feature over here on the side, okay? So if you know the title of the publication that you're looking for, you can type it in here. If you know the type of publication that you're looking for, you can use one of these filters over on the side. That will reduce your list. Just make sure you come back and clear your filter out when you're ready to view everything again, or you might get a little bit scared that everything has disappeared. It really hasn't. It's just been filtered out. But that filter doesn't go away until you make it go away, until you clear it out. So that was another whirlwind. It's like 6 minutes too. And I have been listening to nothing but stunned silence. So does anybody have any questions? Is anybody still there?
Debbie, I think it's just Friday.
It is Friday.
Thank you.
Debbie, I have a question.
Go ahead, Lynn.
When you talked about newspaper articles, you
yes.
said to put them under other creative work. Now, I don't do much with newspapers, but I do a lot more with what we call general press magazines.
Yes.
For our indie magazines. So I still put that in other creative work, or where would those go? That is correct.
That's correct. So if you did something for, I think the Dairy Journal is an example of so name a magazine that you might write an article for, Lynn.
Well, I write some for National Provisioner magazine.
Okay, so you write for that magazine, then it would go under the other creative works, because if you put it under that general press, it's going to put it into a review section of your dossier, which is not the correct section of your dossier.
Okay.
That's just the way they built it. I'm not sure why, but that's where it'll just end up in the wrong place. And then you'll be looking for it and you'll go, this is not a review. This was not published as a review. It was an actual article. So that's why we put it under other creative work.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so you're looking at you were looking at my screen, Rachel, that said 100 pending articles. You don't really need to go through all those if you don't want to. Remember that step where I said it's going to be doing this helpful search of you, which you will probably not find any of the articles that it comes back with as yours. I did that at one point. So that's why there's 109 pending articles for me. Because it's telling me that there's things out there in the universe that have the name Lewis on it. I was like, yes, I know that, but none of them are mine. So I've gone through those. So you don't have to actually do anything with those. Now, if you're a faculty member going for promotion, then I would urge you to pay more attention to those types of things. But that is something that you can work through, like we could work through on an individual basis if you need help with that.
Okay, thank you. I was just curious because, like, a while back, I watched a video from Ohio State where they talked about like how to do Vita, and one of the things they said was to go in there and search, and I did that, and it was recommending me articles that came out before I was born, and just all kinds of.
Right, and when you're doing those search, you can limit the parameters of that search. I was telling you earlier that that's something that you can manage. I believe it's under, let's see, might be under here. No, search settings. So if you go to here, under search settings, under publications, you can limit the years that it's searching. So start date, I put my start date of when I started working for Extension, for example. So then it's not going to go out and search the entire universe. At least it'll, like for my example, it'll limit to the last 25 years. However, you can limit it even further. But that's why I say I don't even really worry about that, because it's searching databases that we typically do not publish to. Now, some other science-heavy people might publish to some of these online journals or online databases, or it might be caught up in those databases. But for example, this is Web of Science. There's many other types of databases that it will search. Here's a list down here at the bottom. So you can tell it to search those certain databases as well.
Okay,
so
if you do have those things in pending, it's not gonna like mess up your report.
Yeah, it's not. Okay. Yeah, it's not going to mess anything up. That's why I usually skip that whole search step at the beginning when I'm adding things. So Melissa put a comment in the chat box. So something that I'm going to try to get up by the end of today is we used to have something called a Vita Quick Start Guide, or a Quick Start Guide to whatever reporting system we were using that day. I'm going to try to get that posted by the end of today. It's going to live at that URL that I shared with you at the very beginning, that OSUE Vita Help URL. And you would be able to search that document, Melissa. Amy Kay has done a really great job of going through that document and making it accessible and searchable, and dividing it out into the different sections of what you're going to be adding into the system. And I just put that link up there again, and that will live under the helpful documents. In addition to putting this recording on the page where all of our other recordings that we've been doing the past few months have been living, I'm going to also put a copy of it on that OSUE Vita Help page that I just posted. So it can live in both places. That way, if somebody's on the Vita Help page on our LOD website, you can find it there, or you can find it on the other pages where we have other recordings posted. So any other questions? Another whirlwind.
All right, great job, Debbie. Looking forward to seeing the Vita manual there. We'll keep on, I think, had a couple conversations about making that more interactive too as we transition to some different formats. So we'll keep that, keep your use in mind and make it as easy as possible. And double thanks to Amy Kay helping us make that accessible and everything she did with it.
Right.
So if that's all, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things that is a feature in that PDF document is there's a nice table of contents, and then at the bottom of each page, if you're like 20 pages into it and you want to go back to the table of contents, we have a link at the bottom of each page that will take you back to the table of contents, so you don't have to like keep scrolling through the document. You can hop around using the links that are in the document.
Yeah. And Danielle,
so it's much more interactive.
Yeah, I was going to remind Danielle to watch her Qualtrics videos, and then we'll
yes,
jump in.
Danielle.
Yes, that is. I put it on my to-do list. It might happen a little over the weekend and next week.
That's all right. Log in and get yourself established in Qualtrics. Debbie, Brian, and I love Qualtrics.
Yeah, and then Danielle, if you haven't sent me that email yet, go ahead and send me the email so I remember to send you the upgrade code for Qualtrics.
I don't even know what the address the web address is to even like get into it. So
okay,
like
so
I have nothing on Qualtrics at all.
I'm putting the link in the chat box.
Okay, sounds good.